Linus Torvalds has finally replied to the whole Rust Linux drama that I talked about in the previous days, and also as an update on the OBS Fedora drama, there's a blog post called "The Fedora Project Leader is Willfully Ignorant About Flathub." So today is Friday. I usually do some lighter, unscripted stuff. So if you want scripted, well-researched stuff any other day of the week, today I just thought I would present those quick updates to you in a much more shallow but also light-hearted way. So let's get to the articles, and the first thing that happened is this. So this is a new email thread which is about the Rust kernel policy. So this is written on the Rust for Linux website, and just should explain how Rust, the policy around using Rust in the Linux kernel. And it talks about many things, especially who's behind the project. He talks about how there are kernel maintainers who support having Rust in the kernel, and also towards the end, is Rust for Linux driven by the Rust community? And also, no, it's actually people involved. The people involved around Rust for Linux come from different backgrounds and organizations. Some are companies, some are hobbyists. So there's many different people, and it's not Rust trying to impose itself. I think that's the line they're trying to go against. And but yes, there's also companies. And there are a few interesting parts, like, did you promise Rust wouldn't be an extra work for maintainers? No, we did not. Since the very beginning, we acknowledged that the costs and risk of a second language introduces. However, we believe the advantages of introducing Rust in the Linux kernel outweighed those costs. And after years, the advantages mentioned in the RFC have become more evident, and part of the initial costs have already been paid. So it's quite positive for the project. They're trying to sell themselves. And most importantly, one thing that they mention, and of course the very first reply to this thread is by, not the very first, I guess. Yes, the very first is by Halvik, who I have talked about at length in the previous video, who is very against having Rust in the kernel. And he introduces some interesting points. First of all, I don't think having a web page in any form is useful. If you want for it to be valid, it has to be in the kernel tree and widely agreed on. Yes, of course, if you just add a Rust kernel policy to the Rust for Linux website, that has a different weight to just having it in the kernel and being agreed upon. And he also complains that some subsystems may decide they do not want to have Rust code for the time being, typically for bandwidth reasons. This is fine and expected. This is a very interesting part, the response that Halvik does claims to this. While Linus in private said that he absolutely is going to merge Rust code over a maintainer's objection. He did so in private, in case you are looking for reference. So this is something we couldn't know about while writing the article in a couple of days back, and it really shows the strength of the support from Linus towards this whole Rust for Linux project. That is something that we had noticed, but the fact that it privately said that he is absolutely going to merge Rust code over maintainer objections, it's a big deal. And it made the Linux news. We've seen it in the Linux subreddit. I don't know. So then we've got a couple of more objections on this. He elaborates on this. So as of now, as a Linux developer or maintainer, you must deal with Rust if you want to or not. And one thing I have not been clear enough in my previous videos, I've been criticized for this, and fairly enough. The merge request that I was talking about, that Halvik was criticizing, I said that it was written in Rust, or at least had some Rust code. That's not entirely correct. It's more like introducing some Rust bindings so that that particular part of code can be used then from Rust code, but that Rust code was not part of the original merge request. Like, that is how I understood it now, but I'm not technical in any way in any part of this, so I'm really sorry if I can't go more into the details. If I had like weeks to spend on this, maybe, but I don't. And well, you can see all the rest of the argument, and it is sort of what you would expect. Like, I would like to understand what the goal of this Rust experiment is. If we want to fix existing issues with memory safety, we need to do that for existing code and find a way to retrofit it. A lot of work went into that recently, and we need much more. But that also shows how core maintainers are put off by trivial things such as checking for integer overflow or compiler enforced synchronization, as in the Clang thread sanitizer. How are we going to bridge the gap between a part of the kernel that is not even accepting relatively easy rules for improving safety versus another one that enforces even strong rules? So, interesting stuff. And obviously discussion arose, and you can see quite a lengthy thread. And one thing that stood out, and there's a Phoronix article about this, is the email by Greg Kroha-Harthman. I tried to pronounce it. And the article makes a compelling case for new Linux kernels drivers to be written in Rust. And if we go to the source, which is here, we see that, yes, it's the same thread, Rust kernel policy. And it comes in as someone who has seen almost every kernel bug fix and security issue for the past 15 years, and who has seen every kernel CVE issued. I think I can speak on the topic, it says. The majority of the bugs we have are due to the stupid literal corner cases in C that are totally gone in Rust. Things like simple overwrites of memory, error path cleanups, forgetting to check error values, and use after free mistakes. That's why I'm wanting to see Rust get into the kernel. These types of issues just go away, allowing developers and maintainers more time to focus on the real bugs that happen, i.e. logic issues, race conditions, etc. So you have a person that is a big proponent of the Rust for Linux project, and you can also see the other side of the argument. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on this particular reply. The summary is good enough for me, and if it gets too technical, that would take time to understand, and I don't quite have that. But interestingly enough, we do have somewhere here another email by Helwig, which says the document claims no subsystem is for to take Rust. That's proven to be wrong by Linus. And while you might not have known that when you're writing the document, you absolutely did when posting it to the list. That is a very dishonest way of communication. That is again the argument that he was going for before. My light is flickering. And he fundamentally disagrees with introducing Rust, and he says, even if you disagree, it's not our place to decide that, and says, it's up to Linus to decide, and he hides behind the experiment thing in public without giving too much guidance, and then decides differently in private, coupled with a misleading policy document that doesn't even make it clear what contributors and maintainers are getting themselves into. So all of this finally resulted into Linus answering, potentially a bit late. I think it could be criticized for this, but what do I know, honestly? Like, he's Linus Torvalds, like he knows about all of these people much more than we do, so he decided to step in now. And he says, and I quote, I'm reading, I was hopeful, and I've tried to just see if things long thread results in anything constructive, but this seems to be going backwards, or at least not forwards. The fact The fact is, the pull request you objected to did not touch the DMA layer at all. What a DMA layer is, I don't know. I'm trying my best here. It was literally just another use of it in a completely separate subdirectory that didn't change the code you maintain in any way, shape, or form. I find it very distressing that you are complaining about new users of your code, and then you keep bringing up these kinds of complete garbage arguments. Honestly, what you have been doing is basically saying, as a DMA maintainer, I control what the DMA code is used for, and that is not how any of this works. So what's next? Saying that particular driver can't do DMA because you don't like that device, or and as a DMA maintainer, you control who can't use the DMA code, because that's literally exactly what you're trying to do with the Rust code. You are saying that you disagree with Rust, which is fine. Nobody has ever required you to write or read Rust code, but then you take that stance to mean it that the Rust code cannot even use or interface to the code that you maintain. Again, the patch was bindings to use the DMA code in Rust, if I understood correctly. So let me be very clear. If you as a maintainer feel that you control who or what can use your code, you're wrong. I respect you technically, and I like working with you, and no, I'm not looking for yes men, and I like it when you call me out on my bullshit. I say some stupid things at times. There needs to be people who just stand up to me and tell me I'm full of shit. But now I'm calling you out on yours. So this email is not about some Rust policy. This email is about a much bigger issue. As a maintainer, you are in charge of your code, sure, but you are not in charge of who uses and the end result and how. You don't have to like Rust. You don't have to care about it. That's been made very clear from the very beginning, that nobody is forced to suddenly have to learn a new language, and that people who want to work purely in C on the C side can very much continue to do so. So to get back to the very core of your statement, the document claims no subsystem is forced to take Rust. That is very much true. You are not forced to take any Rust code or care about any Rust code into the DMA code. You can just ignore it. But ignore the Rust side automatically also means that you don't have any say on the Rust side. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, I want to have nothing to do with Rust, and then in the very next sentence say, and that means that the Rust code that I will ignore cannot use the C interfaces that I maintain. Maintainers who want to be involved in the Rust side can be involved in it, and by being involved in it, they will have some say in what the Rust bindings looks like. They basically become the maintainers of the Rust interfaces too. But maintainers who are taking the I don't want to deal with Rust option also then basically will obviously not have to bother with the Rust bindings, but as a result they won't also have a say on what goes on the Rust side. You got the idea. He reiterates the points. Put it another way, that nobody is forced to deal with Rust does not imply everybody is allowed to veto any Rust code. So that is a good answer. I'm still honestly, personally, quite put off by the tone of these discussions. I don't understand if they really have to be this intense every time, like Linus saying that now have to call in on your bullshit and tell you're full like this. I don't know. We do have to remind ourselves, I think, that this is still a workplace environment. Like, people are being paid by companies to work on this. I'm not sure if this is what a work environment should look like, but again, what do I know? I make videos on YouTube. But nonetheless, I think what Linus is saying overall makes sense to the best of my knowledge, and I'm not here to really give my opinion on it, just to let you know that this is finally some more concrete elaboration of what Linus thinks of all of this. So finally we have that. And that is the Rust and Linux side of things. I'm still recording, yes. Am I? Yes. 14 minutes already, wow. And then we've got this. The Fedora Project Leader is willfully ignorant about Flathub by, where's the name? end of the article. Yes. Jordan Petridis. Is that how you pronounce it? If not, I'm really sorry. I try my best. Again. I should have some sort of automated process that reads name before I start recording so I know how they're pronounced. But till then... oh, and by the way, I really appreciate that this article actually mentions me and shuts out both the video and... and the Libra News website, where all of the articles are, or all of my videos are also present as articles, so you can just go through them instead of listening to my annoying voice. But still, this is about the interview that Brody, that Brody made to the Fedora Project leader, Matthew Miller. By the way, I'm totally envious of what Brody is doing over there. Great job. Since this is more unscripted, do let me say that when I started doing the OBS video, I thought, why am I even doing this? Like, Brody did a much better job at it. But then after a few hours of research, I thought, okay, no, I actually can give some extra information. So I did it anyway, but he's doing a great job. Anyhow, let's zoom in a bit more. He claims that what I want to talk in this post is the outrageous, smearing, and straight-up slanderous statements about Flathub that the Fedora project leader made during the interview. So that's interesting. You can read the whole thing right now. I'm not going to do that because otherwise 30 minutes. If we jump to the first quote, the important part, which I also talked about in my previous videos, is this. I think there is an overall place for the Fedora Flatpaks because Flathub, part of the reason it's so popular, it's because the rules are fairly lax about what can go into Flathub. This is the core of the issue, I think. And this is something that felt weird to me when I first listened to it. I can understand where it comes from, but when doing a bit of research about it, I did find some contradicting statements of people saying, I have actually published both to Flathub and to Fedora Flatpaks, and I have not found the latter to be particularly more throughout in its review process. However, what do I know? Again, I'm not really in the position to... I can report what Miller says, and I'm not an expert in Flatpaks. I haven't packaged Flatpaks. But here we do have some extra information, or at least a different point of view. And this is not the main reason why Flathub is so popular, blah, blah, blah. You can find the requirements in the Flathub documentation if you spend 30 seconds to Google for them, along with the submission guidelines for developers. If those documents qualify as a Wild West and free-for-all, I can't possibly take you seriously. I haven't maintained a Linux distribution package myself, so I won't go to comparisons between Flathub and other distros. However, you can find people, even with red hats, that do so and have talked about it. Of course, this is one of examples and social bias from my part, but it proves how laughable of a claim is that things are not reviewed. Additionally, the most popular story I hear from developers is how Flathub requirements are often stricter and sometimes cause annoyances. And yeah, we see that the rules are fairly lax of what goes into Flathub, statement dreamed up by the arranged. Let's meme. Meanwhile, there are 128 submissions with awaiting changes, blah, blah, blah. And also interesting from a different person here, I maintain application both in Flathub and Fedora repositories. Recording, yes, and I actually find it more demanding to keep the apps in Flathub rather than Fedora repos. Again, this is something that I've also seen elsewhere, so it's a third report even about this. And the reason I didn't give it too much weight in my initial article is that I also found a reply to that by Neil Gompa, Fedora package maintainer for OBS in the RPM, not a Flatpak one, who basically said, this is true for most like applications that are published to Flathub, but a few bigger applications like OBS and Firefox, as a few examples, actually get to sort of ignore some requirements and do their own thing, considering they're so important applications. I don't have the exact quote in front of me right now, and I'm sorry about that. So that is why I hadn't reported about it, but nonetheless, it's significant that this statement, went a bit unchecked. So not great. And this blog post is calling Matt out on that. We also have some more discussions. I don't fully agree with some pieces of this blog post. I want to make an example here. The thing that says verified just says that it's verified from the developers themselves. No, the verified does not mean that the developer signed off into it. And if we go to the documentation, it means that it still went through the review process and all the rest of requirements and policies. The verified program is basically a badge to tell users this is supported application by the upstream developers, rather than the free-for-all that exists currently where you may or may not get an application released from years ago, depending on how stable your distribution is. All true. I've said in my previous article that verified means that it comes from the developers. Obviously, if you publish on Flathub, you're still going through the review process of Flathub. But I think this Miller is not really wrong here, but rather it just continues to be wrong from the previous argument, which is there is no review. And obviously, if Miller thinks that there's no review in Flathub, then the verified thing just means that it comes from developers, and it still doesn't mean that it's reviewed. And so this particular argument doesn't really, it's the same one as before. I don't want to go too long on this, but this is interesting. And it doesn't necessarily verify that it was built with good practices. Maybe it was built in a coffee shop, on some laptop, or whatever, which could be infected with malware, or whatever could happen. Again, if Miller had done the bare minimum effort, he would have come across the requirements page, which describes exactly how an application in Flathub is built, instead of further spreading made-up takes about the infrastructure. I can't stress enough how damaging it has been throughout the years to claim that Flathub, blah blah blah, Flathub may be potentially malware, and he explains, and this is very interesting, I didn't know about this. Applications in Flathub are all built without network access in Flathub built servers using Flatpak Builder and the Flatpak Manifest, which are declarative format, which means that all the sources required to build the applications are known, validated, checksummed. The build is reproducible to the extent possible. You can easily inspect the resulting binaries and the manifest itself used to build the application, and you can read it here. So it seems to be a much safer bet, safer Miller seems to be completely wrong here, completely wrong, and big deal. Another important point is that Miller repeats many times over that, again, no one is checking for things like this. So it does it in a third time, even if I recall correctly. Yes, here, third time with the no review theme. And indeed, Brody, this is what Brody gets out of this discussion somewhere here, but the too long didn't read. Fedora Flatpak is basically, it is built off Fedora RPM build system, and because of that it is more well tested and sort of intended, even if not entirely for the enterprise, designed in a way as if an enterprise user was going to use it. The idea is that it's more well tested and more secure in a lot of cases, not every case. And Miller says, yeah, that's basically it. Which, is, I don't know. Brody is right in understanding this from what Miller said, but what Miller said doesn't seem to hold up to, reality. which is interesting. Again, I'm not an expert in this, but and lastly, on the topic of permissions, the article explains very nicely somewhere around here, yes, that there are static and dynamic permissions. Static are given when you just install applications, and it's like notifications and such, whereas dynamic can be asked each time. And a very interesting topic is that it says that ideally all permissions should be dynamic. So if you want to send notification, you ask the user, hey, can I send you notifications? As it happens on Android, as an example. But that takes effort and time, so you can't have that yet. So some of the stuff is static. And during the discussion between Miller and Brody, the two get confused. So very interesting stuff. I suggest that you give a read. And I have accidentally closed. How much time am I recording? 25 minutes? Way too much. And if I can bring it up again, here there's actually the reply by Miller, which is very interesting. Here. I didn't really intend to create drama, but by the way, I'm sorry if I'm trying to cut this short. You can really go ahead and read it. Very interesting. I'm just recording way too much. I didn't really intend to create drama. My intention was to explain the why Fedora Flatpak side of things, and I painted with a too broad brush in trying to get that across. I'm talking. Can I hide the cookie? No, If I click on continue, it actually gives me to. So it's so annoying. Anyway, sorry. I'm talking to some of the Flathub folks, and I will go back to Brody's show to talk about being wrong on the internet, which, by the way, again, very envious of, but sure. I still have work to do here. Just kidding. I did make a few factual errors. I had checked with someone about the privilege escalation concern beforehand, but there was a miscommunication, and I'm glad to learn I was wrong there. And the idea of Flathub getting out of the build system side of things was from FOSDEM 2024, but not ultimately the direction taken. Mostly though, I seem to have given the impression that I think Flathub is terrible. To the contrary, I think it's awesome, and the people who work on it are intelligent and capable. There is a genuine difference in philosophy, which I talk about more next week. I probably won't cover this anymore. I think this update should sum things over, and I can't speak about this daily updates of drama, but still, I thought that both of these things were interesting and worthwhile to talk about. So now you have some additional perspective, and I just can't get my gestures right. And this one I thought was particularly interesting and worth reading. Just as a final piece, if you're still listening, I will very quickly mention that again, yes, if you go to thelibre.news, you get all of this stuff in an article. Of course, not this one because it's unscripted, but most days you just get the cool researched stuff. And I will also mention that, you can see how long these articles are. And I do them every day. So this takes time, effort, and also a contractor, Luca. And he has his own webpage now. So as you can guess, all of this takes money. So if you go to patreon.com/Nicolove, there's my Patreon, and you can contribute there. You can also just contribute on the libre.news, but also on PayPal, and LibrePay, and Ko-Fi, just pretty much anywhere. And that actually helps me going and to do more cool content, not like this one, which was very rambling, but like the Monday through Thursday content, which is actually scripted and research and spending hours on it. So that was everything, I think. Thanks for following my 29 minutes rant. And I just showered, which is why the hair is like this. And see you on Monday with a new well-researched video.